I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who goes camping. Growing up in the city, my idea of roughing it was a hotel without room service. But there I was, standing in a sporting goods store at 32 years old, staring at a wall of sleeping bags like they were written in a foreign language, trying to figure out the difference between a 20-degree rating and a 40-degree rating, and wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. It started with Daniel. Everything good in my life seems to start with Daniel, if I'm being honest. We'd been friends for about 8 months, ever since he transferred to our office. He was one of those effortlessly outdoorsy types, the kind of guy who actually knew how to tie knots and could identify trees by their leaves. Me? I could identify a good latte and the fastest subway route home. We were different in almost every way, but somehow we just clicked. He'd been talking about this camping trip for weeks. A group from his hiking club was heading up to the mountains for a long weekend, and he kept casually mentioning it. "You should come," he'd say, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It's beautiful up there this time of year. The aspens are turning." I'd laugh it off, make some joke about my natural habitat being climate-controlled, but he'd just smile, this patient smile that made my chest feel tight. The truth was, I wanted to go, not because I suddenly developed an interest in sleeping on the ground or dealing with bugs. I wanted to go because Daniel would be there, and I was starting to realize that I'd pretty much go anywhere if it meant spending time with him. That realization scared me more than any wilderness ever could. So there I was, buying camping gear, texting Daniel pictures of equipment I didn't understand, getting his patient explanations in return. He offered to lend me stuff, but something in me wanted to do this right, wanted to show up prepared, even if I had no idea what I was doing. Maybe I was trying to prove something to myself. Maybe I was trying to prove something to him. The night before the trip, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through worst-case scenarios. What if I slowed everyone down? What if I complained too much? What if Daniel realized I was completely out of my depth and regretted inviting me? What if he figured out that my feelings for him had shifted from friendship into something deeper, something that kept me up at night replaying conversations, analyzing every touch on my shoulder, every time his laugh seemed to last a little longer at my jokes. I'd known I was gay since college, but I'd gotten good at keeping that part of myself quiet, not closeted exactly, just private, careful. I'd had relationships, but nothing that stuck, nothing that felt like it mattered enough to risk the comfortable life I'd built. Daniel was different. Daniel made me want to risk things. The morning of the trip, Daniel picked me up at 5 a.m. I stumbled out of my apartment with my new backpack, probably packed all wrong, and there he was, leaning against his beat-up Subaru, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee. The streetlights caught his face just right, and I had to take a moment to steady myself. He was wearing this old fleece jacket and hiking boots that had seen better days, and he looked more himself than I'd ever seen him in the office. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, handing me a coffee. His fingers brushed mine, and I wondered if he felt it too, that little electric moment that seemed to happen more and more lately. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, and his smile was worth every anxious thought I'd had. The drive up was easy. We talked about everything and nothing, the way we always did. Work gossip, podcast recommendations, his family's upcoming reunion, my mom's latest attempts to set me up with her friend's daughter. I didn't mention that I'd already told my mom I wasn't interested in women. That conversation had been complicated enough without adding the detail that I was maybe falling for my coworker. We met the rest of the group at the trailhead. There were 6 of them, all friends of Daniel's from his hiking club. They were friendly enough, welcoming me into their group with easy smiles and introductions. I immediately forgot in my nervousness. They all seemed to know what they were doing, adjusting their packs and checking their gear with practiced efficiency. I tried to copy their movements, hoping I looked less lost than I felt. The hike in was harder than I expected. Daniel stayed close, pointing out landmarks, making sure I was doing okay. "You're doing great," he'd say whenever I started to lag behind, and I'd push myself harder, not wanting to disappoint him. The trail climbed steadily, and my new boots rubbed in places I didn't know could hurt, but I didn't complain. Around me, the forest was doing that autumn thing where everything looks like it's on fire with color. And despite my discomfort, I could see why people did this. After about 3 hours, we reached the campsite. It was this clearing near a stream surrounded by aspens that shimmered gold in the afternoon light. The group immediately started setting up, and I stood there with my tent bag, staring at the collection of poles and fabric like it was a puzzle designed to humiliate me. Daniel appeared at my elbow. "First time setting up a tent?" he asked, and there was no judgment in his voice, just gentle amusement. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only because you're holding the instructions upside down." He reached over and turned the paper right side up, his hand covering mine for just a second longer than necessary. "Come on, I'll help you. Actually, if you want, we could just share mine. It's a two-person, and it'll be warmer anyway. Nights get cold up here." My heart did something complicated in my chest. "You sure? I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. I invited you, remember? Besides, I could use the company. The rest of them are all pairing off anyway. See?" He gestured to where the others were setting up tents in pairs. So that's how I ended up tent partners with Daniel. We set up his tent together, which was somehow both easier and harder with him so close. He'd lean across me to stake down a corner, and I'd catch the scent of his deodorant mixed with the clean smell of the outdoors. He'd explain what he was doing with this patient enthusiasm, and I'd try to focus on the instructions instead of the way his hands moved, capable and sure. That first night, we all gathered around the fire. Someone had brought a guitar, and someone else had brought ingredients for elaborate camping food that was surprisingly good. I sat on a log next to Daniel, our shoulders touching in the chill of the evening, and listened to the conversation flow around me. These were good people, I realized, Daniel's people, and they'd welcomed me without question, treating me like I belonged there. As the fire burned down and people started heading to their tents, Daniel and I stayed up a little longer. The stars were insane up there, more than I'd ever seen in my life. I'd grown up with light pollution, where you were lucky to see a handful of stars. Here the sky was thick with them, the Milky Way a bright smear across the darkness. "Worth the hike?" Daniel asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I get it now. Why you love this." "It's not just the scenery," he said, looking at me instead of the sky. "It's the people you're with." We went to bed shortly after, crawling into the tent and our respective sleeping bags. The tent was small enough that we were close, and I was hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. I could hear him shifting around, getting comfortable. "Thanks for inviting me," I said into the darkness. "I know I'm not exactly outdoorsy, but this has been really great." "I'm glad you came," he said, and his voice was soft in the dark. "I wasn't sure you would. Thought you might think it was too weird or too far outside your comfort zone." "It is outside my comfort zone," I admitted, "but lately I've been thinking maybe I need to push myself more, try new things, stop being so careful all the time." There was a pause, and then he said, "What do you mean careful?" I almost told him then, almost said that I was careful about who I let in, careful about showing too much, careful about wanting things I wasn't sure I could have. But the darkness made me brave and scared at the same time, and I couldn't find the words. Just, stuck in routines. Same thing every day. You've made me want to break out of that. "Yeah?" He sounded pleased. "You've been good for me too, Work was pretty lonely before you started actually talking to me. You started talking to me, I corrected, because you looked like you needed a friend. You had this wall up, like you were determined not to let anyone in. I made it my mission to get past that wall. Mission accomplished, I said, smiling in the dark. We fell asleep like that, talking quietly until our words got slower and sleepier, until the sounds of the forest took over. I slept better than I had in months. I woke up the next morning to an empty tent and a cold that had seeped into my bones overnight. My sleeping bag was good, but not great, and I'd spent the last part of the night shivering slightly, too stubborn to complain. I could hear voices outside, smell wood smoke, and I knew I should get up. But the cold made me want to burrow deeper into my sleeping bag. Then the tent zipper opened and Daniel crawled in, bringing a blast of cold air with him. "Hey, you're awake," he said. "I was trying not to wake you. I got the fire going again. It's pretty cold this morning." "What time is it?" I asked, my voice rough with sleep. "About 6:30. I woke up around 5 and couldn't get back to sleep, so I figured I'd make myself useful. The fire died overnight. I wanted to make sure it was good and warm before everyone got up. Thought you might appreciate it since I know you're not used to the cold." He said it so casually, like it was nothing, but something in my chest cracked open. He'd gotten up in the cold, in the dark, to make sure I'd be comfortable, to make sure I'd be warm. It was such a small thing, and it was everything. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I wanted to," he said simply. He was still in the tent opening, and the early morning light caught his face. His hair was messy, and there was a softness to him in the early morning that made him look younger. "Come on, I made coffee. Well, camping coffee. It's not great, but it's hot." I crawled out of my sleeping bag and followed him out into the morning. The campsite was quiet, everyone else still asleep. The fire crackled warmly, and true to his word, he'd set up a little camping percolator near the flames. The air was crisp and cold, my breath visible, but the fire radiated heat that felt like a gift. He poured me a cup of coffee in a metal camping mug, and I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth. We sat on the log from the night before, closer than we probably needed to be, and watched the sun start to paint the sky pink and gold. "This is my favorite time of day out here," Daniel said quietly, "before everyone else is up, when it's just you and the world waking up together." "I can see why," I said. The forest was coming alive around us, birds starting their morning songs, the stream gurgling nearby. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced. The city was never this quiet, never this still. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel asked, and there was something in his voice that made me look at him. He was staring into the fire, not meeting my eyes. "Of course," I said, my heart starting to beat faster. "I was really nervous about inviting you on this trip. I kept almost asking you, then chickening out, then asking you anyway. The guys in the group kept teasing me about it, actually. Said I was acting weird." "Why were you nervous?" I asked, even though part of me was afraid of the answer. He took a breath, and I watched his hands tighten around his coffee mug. "Because this place is important to me. These trips, this group, it's where I feel most like myself. And I wanted to share that with you. But I was scared that maybe you wouldn't get it, or that you'd hate it, and I'd realize we weren't as compatible as I thought we were." "Compatible," I repeated, testing the word. "As friends," he added quickly, but there was something uncertain in his voice. "Or, whatever." My heart was pounding now. Whatever. He finally looked at me, and in the early morning light, his eyes were so clear, so honest, that I forgot how to breathe. "I'm not good at this," he said, "at saying what I mean, at putting myself out there, but I like you, okay? More than just as a friend. And I know that might be weird since we work together and maybe you don't feel the same way, and I don't want to make things awkward, but I've been going crazy keeping it to myself. And watching you sleep in our tent last night, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't pretend I just wanted to be your friend when I keep finding excuses to touch your shoulder at work, or stay late because I know you're staying late, or invite you on camping trips because I want you to see this part of my life. He said it all in a rush, like he'd been holding it in for so long that it had to come out all at once, and when he finished, he looked terrified. I set down my coffee mug carefully because my hands were shaking. You watched me sleep? That came out wrong, he said quickly. I didn't mean it creepy. I just meant that I woke up and you were there, and I had this moment of being really happy about it, and then I realized I was being an idiot keeping all this inside. Daniel, I said, and my voice cracked a little. I'm gay. He blinked. Okay, that's good. I mean, I wasn't sure. You never said anything, and I didn't want to assume. I don't talk about it much at work. Old habit. Keeping things separate, keeping myself safe. But I should have told you. Should have been braver. I took a breath. I like you too. So much that it scares me. So much that I bought all this camping gear I don't know how to use, just so I could spend a weekend in the woods with you. So much that I've been lying awake at night trying to figure out if you might feel the same way, or if I was just seeing what I wanted to see. His face transformed, fear giving way to something that looked like hope, like relief, like joy, all mixed together. Really? Really, I said. When you woke up early to make sure the fire was warm, to make sure I'd be comfortable, that's when I knew for sure. That's when I realized that this isn't just a crush or attraction. You're thoughtful in ways that make my chest hurt. You're kind without making a big deal about it. You make me want to be braver, to try new things, to be the kind of person who goes camping even though it terrifies him. It terrifies you? He was smiling now, this big, genuine smile that I wanted to make happen every day for the rest of my life. I'm sitting in the woods at 6:30 in the morning drinking terrible coffee, and I've never been happier, I said. So yeah, it terrifies me. You terrify me. This terrifies me, but I'm done being careful. He reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. His hand was warm from his coffee mug, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. I'm terrified too, he admitted. I've been into you since your second week at work when you brought in those fancy donuts for everyone just because. I kept telling myself it was just a crush, that it would fade, but it kept getting stronger. And then we became friends, and that was even worse, because I got to know you, and you were even better than I imagined. We sat there holding hands as the sun came up fully, painting the campsite in gold light. Around us, I could hear the others starting to wake up. Zippers opening, morning conversations beginning. But for that moment, it was just us. So what now? I asked. Now we finish this camping trip, he said. And then we figure the rest out. Together, if you want. I want, I said. He squeezed my hand, and we sat there a little longer, watching the morning before the others joined us at the fire. When they did, Daniel didn't let go of my hand, and I didn't pull away. A couple of them noticed, exchanged glances, smiled. Nobody said anything, but the acceptance was clear. The rest of the weekend was different after that conversation. Everything felt lighter, easier. We hiked together, and now when Daniel reached back to help me over a tricky spot, I could hold his hand without second-guessing what it meant. When we set up camp the second night, we worked together with an ease that felt natural, comfortable. We'd found our rhythm. That second night, after everyone had gone to bed, Daniel and I stayed up late again. The fire was burning low, and we were sitting close enough that our shoulders pressed together. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Why did you come to our office? You were working at that outdoor gear company before, right? Seemed like a better fit for you than corporate marketing. He was quiet for a moment. I needed a change. I'd been doing the outdoor industry thing for 5 years, and I loved it, but I felt like I was hiding there. Like I'd built this whole identity around being the outdoorsy guy, and I'd lost track of other parts of myself. I wanted to see if I could be good at something different. And I wanted to push myself to be more open about being gay. The outdoor world can be weird about that sometimes. Not always, but enough that I'd gotten careful, like you said you were careful. I didn't want to be careful anymore. And then you met another careful gay guy at your new job, I said. And then I met you, he agreed. And I thought, okay, maybe I was supposed to make this change. Maybe this is exactly where I needed to be. I'm glad you made the change, I said, even though you're making me sleep on the ground and drink terrible coffee. He laughed, and the sound was warm in the cold night. The coffee's not that bad. It's pretty bad, I said, but I'd drink it every day if it meant more mornings like this one. He turned to look at me, and his face was serious now. I know we have things to figure out, work stuff, how we want to handle this, all of that. But I want you to know that this isn't casual for me. I don't do casual well. When I care about someone, I really care, and I care about you. I care about you too, I said, and I'm not good at casual either. Never have been. I'd rather have something real or nothing at all. Then let's have something real, he said, and he leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft kiss, gentle and questioning, and I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding in for months. His hand came up to cup my face, and mine found his waist, and for a moment the whole world was just us. Just this, just the feeling of finally being honest about what we wanted. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling, and he rested his forehead against mine. That was worth waiting for, he said. Worth the terrible coffee and the cold ground and the sore feet, I agreed. We went to bed shortly after, crawling into the tent and our sleeping bags, but this time he reached across the space between us and found my hand, holding it as we fell asleep. And even though it was cold, even though I could hear strange animal sounds in the distance, even though I was completely out of my element, I felt safer than I had in years. The last day of the trip, we packed up camp and hiked back down to the trailhead. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache, and I was pretty sure I smelled terrible, but I didn't want it to end. This weekend had changed something fundamental, had opened up a possibility I hadn't let myself fully imagine before. On the drive back, Daniel reached over and took my hand again, resting our joined hands on the console between us. The others had all said goodbye with knowing smiles and invitations to join them again, and I'd surprised myself by saying yes, I'd love to. So, Daniel said as we got closer to the city, we should probably talk about the work thing. Yeah, I agreed. What are you thinking? I think we should be honest. Not make a big announcement or anything, but not hide either. We're both professionals. We can handle this. And honestly, I don't want to hide. Not anymore. I spent too long being careful. Me too, I said. I'm done being careful. Let's just be honest. See what happens. And us? He asked. What do we tell people we are? I thought about it for a moment. How about we're two people who are figuring it out, who care about each other and want to see where this goes? I like that, he said, squeezing my hand. I like that a lot. He dropped me off at my apartment as the sun was setting. We stood on the sidewalk, and I didn't want him to leave, didn't want this weekend to be over. Come up? I asked. I was going to order food, take a real shower. You could stay for dinner or longer, no pressure. He smiled. I'd like that. Let me grab my stuff. And that's how our first weekend became our first night, which became the first of many nights. We took it slow, figuring things out as we went, learning each other in the way you do when you're building something real. At work, we were professional but honest. When people asked if we were together, we said yes. Some people had opinions, but most were supportive, happy for us. But that morning, that cold morning when I woke up to find Daniel had gotten up early to make sure the fire was warm, that was the moment everything changed. That was when I understood that love isn't just about the big gestures or the dramatic moments. It's about someone thinking of your comfort before their own. It's about someone wanting to share the parts of themselves they love with you. It's about being brave enough to be honest, even when it's scary. Daniel taught me that. He taught me that it's okay to step outside your comfort zone, to try new things, to let people in. He taught me that being careful all the time means missing out on the best parts of life. And he taught me that sometimes the person you're meant to find is the one who wakes up early in the cold and the dark, just to make sure you'll be warm when you wake up. We still go camping, though I've gotten better at it. I have my own gear now, good stuff that I actually know how to use. I can set up a tent and start a fire and identify a few trees. But my favorite part is still those early mornings when Daniel wakes up first and gets the fire going, and I crawl out of our tent to find him waiting with terrible camping coffee and that smile that still makes my heart skip. We've been together for 2 years now. We moved in together last spring to an apartment with good light and enough room for both our stuff. His camping gear takes up half the closet, and my coffee maker has a place of honor in the kitchen. We've found our balance, our rhythm, the way you do when you're building a life with someone. But I still think about that first camping trip, that first morning, that moment of realization that someone cared enough to make sure I was comfortable, even when it meant sacrificing their own comfort. That's what love is, I think. It's not just the big moments. It's the small ones, the quiet ones, the ones where someone shows you through their actions that you matter, that your comfort matters, that they're willing to get up in the cold and dark just to make your morning a little easier. Daniel gave me that. He gave me warmth when I was cold, courage when I was scared, and love when I was ready to receive it. And every morning, whether we're in the woods or in our apartment, whether it's cold or warm, I wake up grateful that I was brave enough to go on that camping trip, to step outside my comfort zone, to let him in. Because the best things in life, I've learned, are the ones that scare you a little, the ones that make you vulnerable, the ones that require you to be honest about what you want and who you are. And sometimes, the best things start with someone waking up early to make sure the fire is warm, to make sure you're taken care of, to show you without words that you're worth the effort. That's what Daniel showed me. And that's what I try to show him every day in my own way. We take care of each other. We make each other brave. We build fires against the cold, both literal and metaphorical, and we face the world together. And it all started with a camping trip, terrible coffee, and a man who cared enough to wake up early. Sometimes that's all it takes. Someone who sees you, who cares about your comfort, who wants to share their world with you. Someone who makes you want to be braver, to try harder, to step outside the safe boundaries you've built around yourself. I found that person, and every cold morning, every warm fire, every cup of terrible camping coffee, I'm grateful that I did.